However, amidst the calm days of winter and the intensified tasks of summer, we witness the dual aspects of life on the Orkney Islands. During the winter months, in the cold and icy environment, Orkney, the tribal chief, would relax at home and spend his time enjoying, drinking, and eating with his around 80 men. During this period, he would reside in a prominent settlement equipped with a defense school. When spring arrived, the activities would intensify. Orkney would check the granary containing seeds awaiting planting and engage in sowing these seeds with his family. During this period, activities such as warfare, plundering, and killing left behind in the winter months, and the focus shifted to agricultural tasks. This represented a seasonal change in the lives of the Vikings. However, in the 13th century Viking work called Ortinga Sagup, Orkney is portrayed not only as a calm leader during winter months, but also as an active leader involved in war, plunder, and killing. Unlike classic Viking stories, this work depicts Orkney as actively participating in war, plundering, and killing, creating a contradiction that highlights the different perspectives in the writings about Viking lives. Slime's life seems to be shaped by the seasonal cycle. After spending a calm winter on the Orkney Islands, Slime and his men would raid the coasts of Scotland or Ireland, seeking plunder when spring arrived. Once they filled their ships with loot, they would return home around midsummer. During this period, Vikings under Slime's leadership actively engaged in raiding expeditions at sea. Upon returning, Orkney would first harvest the crops and store the grains. He would stay there until the cornfields were drained and the harvest was completely stored. However, the time spent with his family was limited because, in the early days of September, he would join another raid. After the first month of winter, he would finally have the opportunity to return home. This cycle was a brief overview of how Scandinavian life unfolded. Slime is portrayed as a character who loves to fight and is perceived as a northern raider. He is seen by his enemies as a bloodthirsty barbarian. The lives of Vikings were often shaped by warfare, plunder, and sea expeditions, and Slime's life reflects this traditional Viking lifestyle. The social structure of Viking society was highly layered, and an individual's social status could vary depending on the circumstances and general norms of the society. Viking society was generally organized in a pyramid shape, but this hierarchy was flexible and could change based on personal achievements. At the top of the pyramid was the king who ruled the country. The king was the highest authority and was often defined as a warrior leader. Below the king were prominent families and leaders like nobles and jarls. This class usually consisted of individuals who stood out due to land ownership, war achievements, or other services. The middle layer belonged to the free farmers and merchants. This class included various professions, from farmers working their own lands to traders engaging in commerce. Individuals in this class usually earned their livelihood by working their own lands. At the bottom were slaves and dependents in a situation similar to slavery. This group generally consisted of war captives or individuals enslaved for economic reasons. However, in Viking society, it was possible to rise or fall in social status. A person could increase their social status through war achievements, land ownership, or other skills. Returning to Slime, his social status probably equated to a leader in the middle or upper class, known as a warrior leader. His social status would change depending on his achievements, leadership abilities, and the loot he gained. His men and family expected leadership, protection, and economic prosperity from him, while he expected loyalty, cooperation, and trust from them. Thus, the complex structure of Viking society was based on solidarity, leadership, and social relationships. Yes, Viking kings were not only warrior leaders but also crucial figures governing their societies, engaging in trade, and ensuring justice. The responsibilities of the king towards his people included: 1. Ensuring justice *. The king was responsible for maintaining a fair order in society. Resolving disputes, enforcing laws, and ensuring peace within the community were among the king's duties. 2. Defense and warfare. Viking kings took defensive measures and, when necessary, led their people in war to protect their lands and population. Viking society generally united against external threats under the leadership of the king. 3. Promoting trade. Viking kings encouraged the development of trade and worked to increase economic prosperity in their regions. This meant making efforts to raise the living standards and wealth of the king's people. 4. Preserving social order. The king made efforts to maintain social order and ensure balanced functioning of society. Establishing a certain order among nobles, free individuals, and slaves was one of the king's responsibilities. 5. Religious role. Viking kings were often seen as the religious leaders of their communities. They performed duties considered sacred according to pagan beliefs and organized societal rituals. Yes, as you explained, the role of Viking kings was not limited to war and security. They had a range of responsibilities such as governing their societies, increasing prosperity, and ensuring the safety of their people. Below are some additional insights into the main responsibilities Viking kings held. 1. Generosity. Viking kings had to be generous towards their people. Sharing their wealth with the population, offering gifts, and organizing special events enhanced the king's reputation and strengthened the loyalty of the people. 2. Justice. Ensuring justice was among the king's responsibilities. Resolving disputes, punishing criminals, and maintaining a fair order among the people required the king to demonstrate leadership skills. 3. Diplomacy. Viking kings had to maintain diplomatic relations with other kingdoms and tribes, entering into various agreements to preserve peace. This was crucial for maintaining a balance of power and protecting their countries from external threats. 4. Promoting trade. Viking kings had to keep the economy vibrant by supporting trade. This meant increasing prosperity in their own countries and establishing robust trade relationships with other regions. 5. Military financing. Viking kings had to manage economic resources effectively to finance their own armies and sustain defensive measures. This was critical for ensuring both internal security and resistance against external threats. Viking kings were required to successfully fulfill a range of roles and responsibilities that not only encompassed the battlefield but also involved organizing their societies, enhancing prosperity, and influencing the daily lives of their people. Viking society was governed by kings and nobles, who led through the Jarl class located just below the pyramid's top tier. Prominent members of this class were often large landowners, providing leadership to the people in their regions. Below are some additional insights into the responsibilities of the Jarl class. 1. Land management. Jarls managed their extensive lands and made agreements with tenant farmers. These agreements were generally based on mutual understanding, and the Jarl's responsibilities included using their lands efficiently and systematically. 2. Economic prosperity. Jarls had to increase their prosperity using the income from their lands and finance their armies during wartime. This was a critical element for ensuring economic stability in Viking society. 3. Spiritual leadership. Jarls served as spiritual leaders for their people. The population regarded them as reliable leaders and protective shields during times of war. This ensured that Jarls remained respected and influential leaders in their communities. 4. Military preparedness. During peacetime, Jarls organized the military force in their regions and prepared them to fight for their kings during wartime. Maintenance of weapons and military training were among the Jarls' responsibilities. 5. Legal affairs. Jarls were responsible for resolving legal matters on their lands and managing courts. Ensuring justice and resolving disputes among the people were part of the Jarl's duties. In this way, Viking society had a hierarchy starting from kings extending to the Jarl class and including lower classes. Each class worked to maintain the order and stability of society by fulfilling specific responsibilities. When the time for war came, Jarls were responsible for recruiting and commanding soldiers. All these soldiers belonged to the lower tier of the pyramid, known as the Bondi class. However, during peacetime, these individuals appeared as farmers, traders, and seafarers. In times of raiding, they transformed into warriors ready to set sail with axes and shields. They were the free men of society, primarily consisting of small landowners. A free man with a small piece of land worked, carved wood, tended animals, and produced small items useful in his daily life in his small workshop with his family and 3 to 4 peers. For goods that couldn't be produced in such small workshops, the easiest way to obtain them was through trade. Therefore, almost every Viking, even if on a small scale, was involved in trade. Like in most societies of the Middle Ages, slaves were utilized by Viking society to cope with heavy labor. The external others formed the lowest layer of Viking society. They could easily be distinguished from other segments of society with their short hair, unkempt appearance, and worn-out clothing. They were commonly employed in heavy tasks such as cutting wood, digging pits, household chores, construction, portering, and manure cleaning. Additionally, they played a significant role in accumulating considerable wealth for the Vikings. Vikings had established an extensive slave trade network from Russia to Ireland. Most slaves were war captives. The main way to gain their freedom was through death, but in some exceptional cases, slaves managed to gather enough money to buy their freedom. Of course, this latter option was only applicable to slaves owned by masters who allowed them the time to work for earning money, as free individuals did not leave much time for slaves to work. In the Viking Age, daily life varied based on one's social class or profession. For a fisherman living by the sea, river, or lake, life typically revolved around a small boat. For a blacksmith, the workshop was the most important part of daily life. The life of a merchant involved long journeys from city to city and town to town. Despite this diversity, the daily activities, culture, beliefs, and behaviors of the communities were quite similar. The central point of daily life was the longhouses seen throughout Scandinavia. These houses, where these communities were made of wood, served as their places of residence. However, in regions north of Norway and in North Atlantic colonies, where finding timber was challenging, houses were constructed mainly using stones. A day in a Viking household would begin early. Allegedly, they would rise before dawn, prepare the fire for the oven, and knead the dough. Common breakfast items included oatmeal, oatcakes, milk, raw fruit, and bread. When men left home in the early hours to go to the fields or workshop, they would leave the keys of the house to their wives. In times when men were not at home, the woman was the head of the household. She would manage household chores throughout the day, oversee rituals, and finish clothes for her family. Additionally, she would make sails for ships that would set sail during the raiding season along with the villagers. In times of peace, Viking men were responsible for plowing fields, sowing seeds, and irrigation. The fertilization process was usually left to the slaves. During harvest time, all villagers and family members were needed in the fields. Everyone had to work quickly to store the products as soon as possible. After breakfast, the main meal was usually dinner, eaten after men returned from the field or workshop. Various meat dishes, stews, oatmeal, sausages, fish, mushrooms, and other varieties could be found on the table of a prosperous farmer. Meals were served in wooden bowls and plates and eaten with hands or wooden spoons. Various types of beer fermented from barley or hops were among the most popular drinks of the Viking Age. Wine was usually consumed by the wealthy. One of the most striking features of the Vikings was their establishment of highly active trade networks from Scandinavia to Europe and the Mediterranean. This trade, especially from the 10th century onwards, led to the tremendous growth of Viking towns such as Ribe, Aldegjaborg, Hedeby, located in the Baltic region. This development quickly spread to Viking settlements in Russia and Europe. For instance, the Vikings who settled in Normandy under the leadership of Rollo in 911 revitalized the city into a trading center despite having been under attack for years and losing the majority of its population. Silver was determined as the primary exchange medium in trade. In archaeological excavations conducted in Scandinavia, a significant amount of silver cut into bars has been found. Traders carried small scales to weigh them correctly. However, silver was not the only exchange medium. Another common method was barter, and undoubtedly, the development of trade brought about some changes in the daily lives of the Vikings. However, this change was more reflected in city life than in farm life. While farm life was more static, city and town life were much more dynamic. Markets, fairs, festivals, all were crucial parts of daily life in cities. Especially in regions where trade was prevalent, people from many different cultures gathered at markets to trade and exchange cultures. This cultural exchange was one of the fundamental factors that led to the mass conversion of Vikings in the 12th and 13th centuries.